I feel like Chinese. Yes, yes, yes,
Yes. Yes.
We're gonna do a short presentation, then we're gonna do a workshop, and we are gonna go up here and do the workshop so we can enjoy the blue sky.
How do they?
So I think that just to go over what industrialization is all about, one thing is centralization. We all know this sort of hierarchical picture of an organization where decisions flow down through all these channels and everything is really, really slow and rigid. That doesn't work really well when you are trying to create a project that has to change all the time. You need to be much more flexible. Another thing of industrialization was that all the products were standardized in order to make them cheap. All the Ford cars were painted black. In that way it was cheaper. Well, projects is about coming up with new products and different products. Another thing is synchronization. Whole society has been synchronized by industrialization to fit all these big organizations. When we go to work, when we have spare time, it's sort of synchronized. When we worked with the Roskilde Social Lab, we worked with a huge organization, and basically because we were out very, very late with this project, they said we couldn't do it because everything at that organization has to be planned 1 year in advance. What else? Maximization, the bigger the better. That's just how we measure success. Does it make sense? Can you recognize some of these things?
Yeah.
I guess you can.
I have a question
Yeah?
about the centralization. When there is like an alliance between two huge companies, how can we?
When there is what?
An alliance between.
An alliance or merger?
Yeah, exactly. Like some huge companies. I mean, it will be changing somehow.
I'm thinking that mergers in organizations are really, really difficult because structures are really, really rigid, and people have a really hard time accepting changes and accepting a different culture and a different way of doing things because everything has to fit into these quite mechanical structures.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes things.
I believe when you do some of the things that you do, this is some of the structures that we kind of crash into, and that's some of the challenges or the barriers that we have to break is because of some of these things. So it's something that we kind of have to bear in mind, that a lot of the things that we need is founded in this. That doesn't mean that we have to do projects in this way.
So, what is the world view that we sort of need in order to be successful in these projects that have to come out with new stuff and do things in different ways? I think we much more accept that humans are whole human beings and not just small machines that has to fit into that other machinery we were talking about. Human beings have individual needs and need to be treated in different ways, in the same way that social problems might need to be customized to different people. Same way that when we work inside a project or teamwork, we have to recognize that each person in that team has special needs, special desires for development and learning that we need to take into consideration. Another thing that we are all constantly told, but is really, really important and is playing a huge factor, is that the world is much more uncertain and is changing a lot more all the time. And definitely coming from things like technology, changing economic from production of goods to knowledge economy, service economy, a huge need for innovation, and globalization is playing a strong factor. We're learning more and more about how people function and how social problems need to be solved. So a lot of things is just changing, and that is also definitely affecting our structures and our projects.
So how do we work with that?
So back to that metaphor with Alice in Wonderland, the whole question to us is if we take that uncertainty serious or we don't. If we pretend that things are like they always were and we plan in the same ways that we have always planned, or if we take that uncertainty serious and calculate it in as an important factor that we know will shape our projects. And that leads us to a classical, what we would say, project paradox. This is one of the things that is, I think, a big paradox in any project. And if you look at this graph, on this line we have the time is the project that is moving forward. And on this is sort of the amount of two things. One thing is that when we start out a project, this is when we know the least about the project. When we are doing, remember the projects solve unique problems and come up with unique products and cover territory that is new. So we don't know anything more or less when we start the project. But as we go along, we learn more and more and more, and we get more and more clever about the problem we're going to solve, and we get more and more aware of what goal we actually should be focusing on. But traditional planning is all about setting up a goal and creating a perfect plan, imagining that we know everything in the beginning of the project. Up here we have sort of the amount of decisions that we have to make in a project. That whole world we just explained demands that we make all the decisions actually in the beginning. Show me a budget, give me a really precise goal, show me a realistic plan, and I might take you off in my organization and say, yes, you can do it. But you have to tell me everything in the beginning, and we also need to do it because if we don't make any decisions, we can't really move forward. That's why it's a paradox. But they go down when we're sort of 1 week before the festival started. We couldn't change anything anymore. It didn't matter if we took different decisions because we were sort of out of time. So can you see how that's a paradox?
It's often, at least from my side, what can keep me from not doing the projects. Because that the surrounding world is demanding that I know a lot of what I don't know yet. So I'm thinking, because I can't answer all these questions, then I better not do it, or I better not take decisions because I don't have the knowledge yet. So it's a thing that plays outside us, but it's also a thing that is playing within us.
What often happens is that we just say that, okay, we know more or less that we can achieve a goal that is somewhere around here, and we can make a realistic plan to go there. And that's what we do, and that's what we get signed off in our organization or from our stakeholders or our sponsors or whoever we're working with. That's just sad, because we have such a big opportunity to learn during the project and to play around with new ways of doing stuff, because we meet people during the project. Things change and opportunities come towards us. So in the project, we believe as much as possible you need to raise that knowledge curve as fast as possible, and you need to be flexible and see maybe the goal is somewhere else, and see how long you can postpone those decisions and play around with it. Yeah?
It's like this broadly says to start, like when you finally get enough knowledge, it might be too late to make a decision.
That's why it's a paradox. Yeah. That's why I don't have a direct clever answer for just saying that's how you do it. It is a paradox and we're struggling with it, but there are some things I think we can do, or a way we can think about it. So this was sort of the backdrop. So here's our model. Basically this one outlines a generic project. This could be a picture of more or less any project. You have some kind of phase where you start to decide what is it that I want to do. More or less, what should the goal be about? Move into some kind of phase where we make a plan, put together a team and figure out what are we going to do. Then we execute it, and finally we sort of evaluate it. Definitely these phases cross over, and you do many of these things often at the same time, but just to get a logical understanding of it. So if we look at how traditional projects are done, fitting into that old structure, then what we think is really, really important in the first phase is precision. Being as precise as we can about the goal. Remember that a project often has to be signed off and approved many different places in that hierarchy. So the more precise we can be about the goal, the more likely we are to get a goal. Because then we can also make a really, really realistic plan that everyone can say, yes, I believe you can do it, here's the money. Realism, realism, realism. What happens then when we're going to do it? It mainly becomes about controlling that the team stays within this plan, doesn't drift too far from that plan, doesn't think too much about what the goals could be. Finally, when we're done, it's all about justice. It's about going back to the people who gave you the money and saying, okay, did you deliver what we agreed upon or did you not? Justice. So, thinking about the fact that we don't really know exactly what the goal should be about, it doesn't make that much sense to us to focus on precision. Sure, we need to think about what the goal is, otherwise we can't start. We think there's something which is much more interesting in this phase, and something which is much more interesting to use the goals for, and that is to motivate the team, to make it really, really worthwhile for the team to engage in exactly this project. Also to motivate them with a very ambitious goal and say, could we imagine ways of achieving this really, really interesting, cool goal that we all are motivated about? And let's see how that plays out in the next phases, if that's what we're doing. Then a realistic plan doesn't become the most important thing. It becomes more about productive inputs for the next phase. And by productive inputs, I mean things that will help us explore how we could reach that very, very high and ambitious goal. Maybe we won't reach all the way up to very high ambitious goal, but we will push ourselves during the project to find different ways and alternatives to always stretch. And that's much more motivating for us as a team to have that perspective. So then the real carrying out of the project doesn't become about control of this plan. It becomes about encouraging exploration and creativity. Basically, you can say that when you are controlling and trying to keep everybody within that realistic plan, all you're doing is standing in the way of creativity, standing in the way of looking for alternative solutions. You're all the time saying, no, this was the agreed plan. Finally, evaluation doesn't become so much about justifying the final product, because that has probably changed a lot, because you've learned so much during the project. What does it then become about? Then it becomes about learning what can you actually use that result for in the organization or in the society or wherever you are. And then also, of course, learning about this whole process, what we're going to do the next time, of course. And of course, also these phases, they blend together. If we need to explore a lot during the execution phase, we also need to apply that learning from that learning curve along the way. So this is our very, very simple model, and all it says is that we don't know exactly what the goal should be. We don't know the best way of solving this problem, but we will learn about it during our journey. And we believe the interesting thing is about motivating the team to explore how that problem can be solved. We believe it's about communicating what is important in this phase. Not what should we exactly do, but what should we focus on, what should we explore. Then we explore a lot and come up with creative solutions to challenges and try to catch the opportunities that comes as the project moves forward and implement them. And finally, evaluation is all about learning, because that's about looking forward, not looking back.